Hi, my name is Dr. John Douillard, and welcome to our 4-part video series called Question Your Digestion, Repair the Damage, and Eat Fad-Free. I mean, there is a lot of information that I want to share with you about how to understand why we should question our digestion, why we should repair our intestinal tract and how important that is, and of course, why we should definitely not eat according to the newest and latest fads, which just keep coming again and again and again. For example, the gluten-free industry is now a $16 billion a year industry. And don't you think for one second that those $16 billion are affecting what we think and what we say and what we do and what we eat. I mean, there's a monetary program here in place here, and we have to be aware of the fad and the influence of that fad. So I want to talk to you about how to repair your digestive system, but I first want to go back to is why we should question our digestion. And in this 4-part video series, I want to talk to you about a handful of things. One, how we got here in the first place. And we're going to talk about processed foods and where they came from, exactly what they do to break down your digestive system and how to repair all that. How stress and a lifestyle that we live today is really devastating to our digestive system. How sugar is a deal breaker for good and quality digestion. And also how new science shows that we have completely disconnected ourselves from the circadian rhythms and how we've lost our connection with nature, which got us here in the first place. So that's what I want to talk about today in this first video. Then I'm going to take you into a journey of how all that breaks down your digestion, and in the second video I'm going to talk about how to repair your digestive system. And then from there, in the next video, the third video, I'm going to talk to you about what I think is really important. Where do all the symptoms come? Where does the brain fog come, and the skin rashes, and the bloating, and the gas, and the fatigue, and the lethargy, and the depression, and the anxiety, and the inflammation, and the autoimmunity? Where do all these problems come from? And where they come from is what we're going to talk about in the third video. And it's really important you understand that the symptoms don't just come sort of out of your digestion. There's a mechanism and a pathway, and if we understand it, and it's simple, if you understand it, we can fix it. And that's what I want to share with you is a baseline understanding from how we got here in the first place, how it broke down your digestion, how it causes symptoms, and then how to repair it. And that's what this is about. And I really think it's critically important because here we go again down another fad dietary pendulum swing road, eating all kinds of crazy things. I understand that people say, well, gluten-free industry is gluten is bad and gluten's a poison and gluten's hard to digest and I feel bad when I eat it, so I shouldn't eat it. Or I don't eat it. And I'm fine with that. You never have to eat gluten. Again, I'm not here to convince you should eat gluten or wheat. That's not the point of this video. My point is that if you have things that you once were able to digest 15, 10, 20, 30 years ago, and now you can't, your digestive system is broken down. And that means that not only are we symptomatically taking the stressors out of our digestive system so we feel better, I don't eat wheat, I feel better, great. But what about the hard to digest environmental pollutants and pesticides and preservatives? There's 400 billion pounds of toxic chemicals dumped in the American environment every single year. 72 million of them are cancer causing. So if you can't digest well, the way you used to, and maybe some of us never even digested well, and that is rebootable as well. And there's an understanding of why we all got into this mess in the first place. And I want to help us understand it and unravel it. But if you can't digest well and you just take the food out of your diet, what about the toxins in the environment? What about the mercury that comes from the coal mine power plants that put clouds of mercury into all over the world that filter on every single organic vegetable, and you can't wash it off? And that, if it isn't digested and processed properly, it ends up into your blood, into your fat, into your brain. And there's good science now that suggests that that's where it ends up, is in your brain, affecting cognitive function and a whole lot more that I'm going to talk about in the third video when I talk about the symptoms and how they manifest. So this is really important to understand how we got here, how the symptoms manifest, and how to unravel it. So that's what I want to share with you in this video series. And I'm super excited to help us get a handle on it, because just taking food out of our diet is such a simplistic concept. When I got into practice in 1984, people would come with indigestion and chronic fatigue, and candida was big back then, as it is today. And we would tell people, don't eat wheat and don't eat dairy, and they would get better. And then they would come back 3, 4, 5 months later. I was better, but now my problems have come back. And then you say, well, now, don't eat nuts and seeds and other hard to digest allergenic foods, corn, soy, things like that. And then they would then evolve to become a vegetarian, take meat out of the diet because that's also hard to digest. And then they would become a vegan. And then they would feel better for a while, and then that would become problematic. And then some people would even become raw foodists. And what happened time and time again was people would just chase their symptoms with taking stuff out of the diet until there was nothing left to eat. And now we're looking down the barrel of real hardcore nutritional deficiencies because we've changed our diet, restricted so many darn foods that we've lost our nutritional diversity. One study showed that and that's on top of the fact that in the last 50 years, the global diet diversity, different kinds of foods we eat all over the world, has shrunk by 56%. In other words, we're eating 50% less foods in terms of diversity, like coconuts and all these exotic foods from around the world. They're being industrially made, and now we're eating 56% less diversity. On top of the fact that people, even with that whatever is left over, we have a hard time digesting a handful of those, so it gets even shorter and smaller. So we are going down a road of eating less and less foods. And less foods means less and less diversity of foods, which means diversity of bacteria, diversity of your microbiology. And there's hard science now to show that your microbial diversity comes from the bugs and the foods that we eat. When you spray a pesticide or an herbicide on a field of crops, you basically kill most of the microbes on that plant. In the dirt, there are microbes. That's where they come from. And those microbes are super connected to the earth, right? That's where they live, right? And those microbes are super connected to the rhythms of nature. In fact, the very, very first cell on this planet, they have science to show us, it was connected. Its survival depended on a circadian clock, an ability to connect with light, dark, cold, hot cycles. And that's how we evolved. The microbes are sort of the remnants of that primitive intelligence that connects the circadian clock to cellular structure. Those microbes attach to different foods. Those foods, we eat them, those microbes become our microbiome. And it changes dramatically from season to season to season. So the microbes in the spring have this ability to decongest us from allergies and things like that. Microbes from the foods in the summertime have this ability to get heat out of our body, to dissipate heat so we don't overheat. It's amazing when you look at the anthropology of how we evolved and how getting rid of heat was such a big deal and why we outperformed the Neanderthals, because we were able to dissipate heat. This comes from our microbes. In the wintertime, these microbes are completely different and they support our ability to boost immunity and fight off infections. And they change from season to season to season. Like in one study, they showed deer who are able to eat bark in the winter because they have certain really aggressive teeth-chomping microbes that can digest and eat bark in the winter that come from the soil in the fall for winter eating. And they have different microbes that digest leaves in the summer. And the study showed that when the deer was actually eating bark in the summertime, where they didn't have the proper microbes, that it would literally cause a level of indigestion. It could literally kill the deer. And I was like, whoa, when I read that science, I was so blown away by that. I wrote a book called The 3-Season Diet, all about how Ayurveda suggests we should eat with the seasons and how important that is. So I wrote that in the year 2000. And then when the microbiology information came out, and now we know the microbes in the soil change from season to season, and we know the deer die when they eat out of season, and humans have no clue what's in season or not. We eat the same food 365 days of the year. And a new study article in Scientific America said that the new science or medicine that will revolutionize medicine as we know it today is what they're calling circadian medicine. Circadian medicine means beginning to live a lifestyle that's connected to the rhythms of nature. The science shows that human beings have lost their connection to the rhythms of nature. That is devastating. The first cell, little tiny baby little cells on the planet, had that connection. We evolved to support and maintain that connection, and we've lost it. We've completely lost it, according to science. And that has a devastating effect on our health and our microbiome, which we now know does the heavy lifting for every single thing. So, and this is why in my book, 3 Season Diet, great, I wrote a book about it, but not enough people got the message how important it was. So we actually decided to put a grocery list, recipe list, seasonal superfoods together for every single month of the year in something that I call the 3 Season Diet Challenge. And you can get it for free on my website called the 3 Season Diet Challenge, right on my homepage. Just sign up for it and you get it for free. And in your inbox, you get recipes, superfoods, grocery lists that tell you what's in season in every month of the year. Because it's so important, because our connection to the rhythms of nature come from the soil. And if we eat in season, we start to entrain those rhythms. So we get hungry for the right foods in the right season, tired at the right time, hungry at the right time of day. The science shows that our circadian clock is so critically important. In one study, they took a group of humans and they shipped them to Israel and they shipped them right back. And they measured their microbes when they went there and when they came back. And when they came back, their microbes were completely disturbed. And they started to shift towards what they saw as a diabetic and obesity-prone microbiology. They then took mice and they severed their circadian clock in their brain. They severed their circadian, they had no connection to the rhythm. So the mice who eat at night, or actually, they eat at night and they sleep in the day, they started eating all the time, sleeping anytime, completely disconnected from their natural rhythms and completely disconnected. And their microbes started shifting towards obesity and diabetes. And then they took the bugs from the humans that came back from Israel and they stuck those into healthy mice, poor, healthy, unsuspecting mice, and they injected their poop into these poor mice. And in short order, those mice started eating incessantly, up all day, sleeping all night, doing completely the opposite of what they should be doing, and their bugs shifted to become obese and diabetic. Our connection to these rhythms of nature is powerful, and it doesn't take, a lot of effort. I give you grocery lists and say, eat from these foods, eat more of these foods. Here's this list of foods that are harvested in the summertime or in the wintertime or in the springtime. Circle them if you like them and eat more of them. This is baseline information. The science now also shows that if you eat, late at night, we're not like mice. We don't do well eating late at night. The studies show if we eat a breakfast and a lunch, we do way better. We lose more weight. Our heart disease gets much less risk. Significant improved health index, better longevity when we eat earlier in the day and don't eat later in the day. This is what they're calling now the new circadian medicine. Something that Ayurveda talked about it's Ayurveda 101, connecting with the rhythms of nature. And of course, the reason why you want to be going downstream with the current of nature is because it's easier, and it's calmer, and it's quieter, and it's more still. And when you think about our lifestyle with so much sensory input, bombarded by all this activity, things we have to do, and obligations, and taxes, and bills, and just to survive, we have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. This is an overwhelming amount of stress. And if you are overwhelmed with stress and living against the grain of these circadian rhythms, going upstream against the current, it's hard to push against the grain of Mother Nature. Going against the tide is not a wonderful idea. And we know that all of that stress plows right through your intestinal microbiology, where 95% of your serotonin is manufactured, stored, and produced. Only 5% of those serotonin and other neurotransmitters for mood stability and brain function are in your brain, only 5% in your brain at any given time. They all live here in your gut. And we know now that the stress plows through your gut. We process our stress in our life through the intestinal skin. That's how it works. We know that the very, very first cells on the planet had a cell membrane. And the cell membrane was what we call the awareness membrane. And if you take the nucleus out of the cell, which is you always think is the brains of the cell lives fine, happy, long life, no problem. Only thing that cell can't do without a nucleus is reproduce. So what these little cells realized was that the cell membrane, which had the awareness of the outside world, they figured, hey, if we team up and create bigger cell communities, we have more awareness of this outer environment, more connection to the rhythms of nature, therefore we can survive. That cellular skin, that cellular membrane, has evolved to become our skin. And embryologically, that same skin became our intestinal tract, which evolved to become our brain and our central nervous system. So the brain and the central nervous system come from the exact same tissue as our intestinal skin, which evolved from this cellular membrane, which is the awareness membrane, so we have this connection to the outside world. So it makes perfect sense, if you follow me, that having awareness and being connected to these rhythms of nature is exactly going to revolutionize medicine as we know it today. And part of, so much all of what Ayurveda was about, was to teach us how to reconnect with those powerful and subtle rhythms of nature. And when we screw it up and we go against the grain of Mother Nature, who takes the beating for that? Your digestive system. It's no wonder we can't digest wheat and dairy and corn and soy and all these hard to digest foods anymore. And is it appropriate for us to blame these foods? And like I said, if you eat them and feel bad, don't eat them, fine. But that doesn't solve the problem. The environmental pollutants and toxins and other hard to digest foods are going undigested into your guts, ripping your intestinal tract to shreds because they haven't been broken down properly. And that is something that we can fix, and then you can decide if you want to eat bread or not eat bread. And there's many strategies to pull it off. I wrote a book called Eat Wheat. It's all about how to reboot digestion and how to re-enter these foods back in your diet safely. But more importantly is also understanding how we got here in the first place. Now, 60 years ago, what happened was there was a real strong elevation in heart disease taking place in America and around the world. And they didn't know what was causing it. There was a lot of research coming on that sugar was the cause of heart disease. Well, about recently in the Journal of American Medicine, JAMA, maybe the most prestigious journal on the planet, did an expose article where they actually, researchers from the University of San Francisco, found documents, letters signed by the sugar industry executives that paid off Harvard researchers to deflect and misdirect the public's attention from sugar being the cause of heart disease to fat and cholesterol being the cause of heart disease. And that stuck. And they based a lot, and this is the part that never made sense to me, because they based this research on a study by a doctor named Ansel Keys, who did a study on rabbits and rats. And they gave rabbits a high cholesterol animal fat diet, and they all got heart disease. Didn't go very well for those rabbits. Well, rabbits are vegetarians, so generally speaking, if you give a vegetarian a diet that they're not generally used to eating, they're not going to do well. In the same exact study, they gave rats the high cholesterol diet, and they did fine. They didn't get any high cholesterol, they didn't get any heart disease at all. They were fine. But that was the study that the Harvard researchers used to help deflect the attention away from sugar, which was the true culprit for heart disease, to cholesterol. And somehow, through a very odd series of events, because the industry needed a solution for heart disease, they blamed it on animal fat cholesterol, which is a very vital, important fat for us to make hormones with, for us to manufacture cell walls, skin. Is so important for the body. There's no way you could eat enough cholesterol in your diet. The body still makes another couple 100% more, no matter how much you eat. So we desperately need cholesterol, but that became the new public enemy number one. And off we went into a diet that was a low-fat, low cholesterol, no fat diet. School lunches changed. Meals changed. Food manufacturers jumped on the new FDA mandate, which, by the way, in January of 2016, the FDA took cholesterol off the nutrient concern list, citing that there was absolutely no evidence suggesting that cholesterol literally caused heart disease. And for the last 50-something years, we've been eating a diet of no cholesterol based on flawed science and the misinterpretation of science. And a whole food industry that took the bait and went off in the wrong direction, allowing us to drink Coca-Cola and all these soft drinks as if sugar was just this wonderful, fine thing. And don't think it's still not happening. Recently, the Coca-Cola industry paid over $3 million to direct and again misdirect the attention from sugar to lack of fitness in relationship to kid and childhood obesity, saying it's not the sugar that they're eating that's making them get fat, it's the lack of fitness. So Coca-Cola put on this big campaign saying everybody should get fit. Yes, that's true, but we now have hard science linking sugar intake to obesity. So what happened was the fats that the food industry replaced the cholesterol with were processed fats, refined fats, bleached fats, deodorized fats, boiled fats. Basically, when you take and you press a seed and you make it into a vegetable fat, that oil is so vulnerable to rancidity, just one photon of light and it starts to become rancid. So what they did to make oils sort of shelf stable is they bleached and deodorized and boiled them and rendered them basically with no nutritional ingredients that could ever go rancid. So when you walk down the aisle in the grocery store and you look at all those yellow oils, bottles of oil in these plastic clear bottles, in the old days, oil was delivered like the milkman used to deliver it, in small little dark bottles that were light proof, and they would deliver small amounts of them, and you use these oils and always keep them in a very secure, cool place so they stayed stable. Now they're in bright, fluorescent lit supermarkets with clear bottles and plastic containers. That oil is indigestible. It will not digest. This is the hallmark of processed foods. Processed foods use these oils as a dough conditioner, a dough softener, and a preservative. So when you put that oil into bread, for example, it'll stay on the shelf and stay squishy for weeks, months even. The bread on the counter generally doesn't go bad, and it stays squishy for an inordinate amount of time. I think we all realize that. In the old days, bread was sort of made with wheat and salt and water and maybe a starter, and in the day it was hard as a rock, and you could knock somebody out with it in 2 days. You could have baguette wars with it. It was just hard as rock. Bread today doesn't do that. The bread that would get hard as rock in a day or two is because the microbes would eat that. They would eat the oils. They would gobble it up. It would be food for the microbes, which make up 90% of the cells in the human body. The stuff on the counter and the shelf, nobody eats it. The bugs won't eat it. It doesn't go moldy. It doesn't go bad. If the bugs won't eat it, think about it. Should you? If you're of your human body, 90% of your cells are microbes, and you're eating stuff that microbes won't touch, how are you feeding the microbiome that does the heavy lifting for every single thing, including manufacturing the neurotransmitters to keep your mood stable, your brain functional, clear, focused, your ability to digest hard to digest foods comes from those microbes. And we're feeding it foods that they simply can't eat, possibly in many cases kills them, makes their life very, very difficult. You add that to the fact that we're eating a lot of overly sanitized foods, we scrub, clean everything, antibiotics, and just keep clobbering our microbiome to the point where it becomes much less diverse. And that less diverse, the more vulnerable your microbiome is. The microbiome is sort of like a big football game or a baseball game. You have 12 or 14 guys on the field, and you have a huge amount of spectators. good guys and bad guys on the field, good bugs and bad bugs, and you have this vast amount of spectators. And those are called spectator commensal microbes, who do nothing good or bad but take up valuable real estate. When you keep clobbering your intestinal microbiome with indigestible foods that the bugs won't eat, antibiotics, super sterilized everything, toxins from the environment, just keep clobbering the intestinal skin, you end up killing the good guys, and a lot of the good guys, and they're replaced with these commensal real estate occupying non-functional microbes that do nothing. And what you have to do is get rid of those spectators and build a better stable of good microbes. So you have diversity. And how does that happen? That happens from eating foods from the earth, from the ground, in different seasons, and changing your microbes and getting back and getting reconnected with nature. That's why at LifeSpa, if you ever notice, one of the reasons why I use nothing or mostly whole or organic herbs, because every organic herb, and they're sort of exotic. Like if you look at like our liver repair formula, for example, it's like 5 different bitter roots from all over different parts of the US or even some and even in the world. And they have a whole bunch of different microbes that attach to each of those different plants. And when you eat that herb, you're getting all that microbiology. It's diversity. It's what we lack. And that's why I believe that I don't want people to be on pills and powders for the rest of your life. I don't want you to be on probiotics, which is like the next new thing for the rest of your life. I want to build a digestive system and intestinal skin that can support healthy microbes, and then have your foods. And if you're going to take herbs, take whole herbs that sort of act as a diversity-provoking, kind of inoculation of your intestinal skin, which they desperately need. And I'm going to give you strategies on how to reboot your intestinal microbiome and reboot your digestion so you get that done, so you become self-sufficient in that regard. Processed foods, the hallmark of them is, like I said, these oils, these cooked oils. So when you look at your foods and the labels of anything you eat, if there's oil in your bread, which there is in almost every loaf of bread, crackers, chips, anything that has oil in it that's been cooked, I would highly suggest try your very best to avoid that or eat as minimal amount of that as possible, because it goes rancid, and that's a real problem, okay? And that becomes indigestible. These processed foods have been studied to increase the risk of metabolic syndrome by 141%. Metabolic syndrome is the combination of abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and low good cholesterol, low HDL. That's what's called metabolic syndrome. Processed foods increase your risk of that by 141%. They gave people a whole food diet, including whole wheat, by the way, and they saw a reduction of metabolic syndrome risk by 38%. The issue that I'm starting to make for you is it isn't necessarily the foods that are the problem. It's something else. This processed food diet, what it did to us was it infiltrated not only a lot of other additives and preservatives which are indigestible, but the fats congested directly our livers and our gallbladders. Eating that kind of ingestible fat, it congested the liver and gallbladder to the point where the liver and the gallbladder became congested in their ability to digest hard to digest foods again. And in the next video, I'm going to take you step by step through this process of how these processed oils and these processed foods have literally broken down our digestive system, broken down our ability to detoxify the way we were designed, and setting us up for a host of digestive problems, food insensitivities, food intolerance, the gluten-free industry, as well as the inability to detoxify. And every day I read the science that suggests another new toxin that they found in the brain. These magtites from air pollution, iron particles oxidizing our brain, sugar-related AGEs, glycation end products that are the smoking gun for all kinds of degenerative issues, all stem from, as we're going to see in the next video, from poor digestion. This mistake that they made 60 years ago, that we've been living through now for decades, is directly linked to our inability to be good fat burners on this planet. And as a good fat burner, you can't get depression, because that depends on having good fat in your brain. You can't get diabetes, because diabetes is sourced in your liver, not your pancreas. And of course, if you can't burn your fat good, you're going to get overweight. You're going to store the fat that you can't burn and become obese. The three major epidemics of our time are linked to that mistake. My concern is as we move into the future, we don't fix the real problem. Because you know, when they write books calling books like Grain Brain, you know, this isn't about just taking wheat out of your diet. The newest thing is by taking apart the food and finding one tiny chemical in a food that's hard to digest and one tiny particle of food, and then saying the whole thing is bad as a result of it. And then we're looking at taking all grains, all legumes, all nuts and seeds out of our diet. That's what scares me. This gluten-free industry is a powerful machine now, and it's going to continue to take this, again, misinterpreted science and say all grains are bad. That's what the book is about, not just wheat. All nuts and seeds and legumes and beans are bad. And if you look at the people on the planet who have the best cognitive function, who live the longest, who don't have diabetes, fact, they eat wheat, they eat grains, they eat nuts, they eat seeds, they eat these foods, but they eat them in the whole non-processed form. And if we can get that going, and then do a little reboot for the digestion, and let me guide you through that process to help you eradicate some of your symptoms, we can become digesters and detoxifiers the way we were designed and live an incredible, healthy life well into our 70s, 80s, and 90s. And realistically, I don't think that even that living in the 80s or 90s is, I think we can live way longer. We have so much information about how to be healthy at 100, as opposed to years ago we were just broken down because of all the toxic foods and stress. We have great opportunity, but we have to think for ourselves and realize that we have been dealt a dose of industrial processed foods that we now have the ability on this planet to buy and source foods that are actually pure and clean. And we have the ability to reboot digestion and get it back right and live the second half of our life in a real healthy way so we can really enjoy every single day of our life and not have indigestion. 70 to 80% of the American population complain of digestive issues. That's unacceptable. And we need to fix that before we do anything else. And then, like I said, you can choose whether you want to eat a little wheat or not eat a little wheat. That's not the issue. The issue is let's fix the cause and stop treating the symptoms, something we're so darn good at. Follow me, join me for our next video as I take you step by step through what happened to our digestive system, how it got broken down, and in the next video, talk about how to reboot it and build it back up. And then the videos after that, we're going to get into the symptoms and we're going to address those directly as well. So please join me for the next video, and I love to have your comments below. Please leave your comments. Let me know how you like this video, what you think. Tell your friends about this, because I think this is revolutionary information, and I don't see anybody else talking about it. Does everybody else say, don't eat this and don't eat that? It's so simple, you know. I feel like that's just such a simplistic concept, you know, and I love the medical profession, but they have not been practicing natural medicine for a very long time. And when I first started practicing natural medicine 30 plus years ago, I told people to get off wheat and dairy too. And they got better for a couple of months. And it became very obvious to me that the source of the problem was not the wheat and the dairy. And I spent the last 30 years helping people reboot digestion, be able to eat wheat and dairy again, get their digestion back the way it was designed, and fixing that. And I come to the conclusion after 30 years that you can't just tell people, stop eating this or that, and all their problems are going to be solved. It isn't that simple. We are being sold a very simplistic bill of goods, and the problem is, here we go again, we're treating the symptoms and leaving the cause, which is potentially way more dangerous for us, untouched, and predisposing us for real issues down the road. So please leave some comments, tell me how you like this, tell your friends, and I'll see you for the next video.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.